Welcome to In the News for July 12th, 2024. My name is Brett Birdie from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Good to see you as always, Jeff, every week. And boy, you got a humdinger of a story this week. I've only seen a couple of mentions of potentially a brand new HomePod that has a screen, or maybe it's a screen that has a HomePod attached. I'm not really sure how to describe this, but some interesting rumors that popped up this past week.
It is. You know, the rumors have been around for a while, and I try to avoid talking about pure rumors because you can talk about them forever. But this one, it crosses over once there's something more tangible. And the thing that's tangible here is the next version of tvOS, the beta version, which is going to come out this fall, is available now. So if you get on the developer, bandwagon, you can put it on your television and you can start to look at the code. So somebody was looking at the code, and they said inside of the code, not only is there the stuff that we would expect to see on a television, but we also see this thing called plasterboard. And you may remember
plasterboard. Okay.
For years and years and years and years now, the interface on an iPhone, the code name for that is Springboard, like the thing that has your apps on it and that you touch it. I remember that. That is called Springboard. And so they found this thing called Plasterboard, which was, first of all, responding to touch, which most TVs wouldn't do. It had a way that you could tap in your code to unlock it. And that would never be something you would put on a television, right? And so the theory is that maybe what's going on is the long-standing rumors of Apple coming out with a version of a HomePod that has a screen. And again, Amazon has had similar Echoes for a while now, the Echo Show and stuff like that. And so the idea is that it would be a speaker that would have a screen, and that instead of putting, you wouldn't put Mac OS in that, you probably wouldn't even put iOS on it. You would want something more simple. So why not take tvOS and come up with a version of tvOS for this device, maybe with this plasterboard in it, and then that would be the interface. And so I have to admit, once this is actually in shipping code, there's no reason for Apple, in my mind, to put it in shipping code, at least even beta code, unless they're sort of, is it this calendar year, next calendar year, coming close to something? And
there's
so
some progress, right.
So, you have something like you're showing on your screen right now, somebody has just simply taken a small iPad mini and superimposed it on top of a HomePod. And that might be one thing that it could do, but there's other ways that it could happen. But it's the idea of sort of merging together a HomePod, so it's a speaker, and a something with the screen, like a very simple iPad or iPad mini. So it lets you speculate, and obviously we'll see what Apple has to say about the device. Maybe they'll have some incredible use for it if it does come out that I'm not even thinking about. But I feel like we know enough about these devices to sort of think about, the thing that people often think is, wouldn't it be nice to have something in your kitchen that would be, have a screen on it?
That's
so
what I was thinking.
See things like a calendar or messages or simple stuff like that, or maybe look at a TV program or something on YouTube while you're cooking dishes, or watch a cooking show as you're actually cooking. So something with the screen on it, but a very simple screen, but also have a nice enough speaker. I mean, obviously an iPad mini has a built-in speaker, but it's, you're not going to be dancing out to the latest tunes. I mean, the quality is just okay. If you had a more robust speaker with it, would it be an interesting product? So that's one level of rumors coming from one end, right? But then the other that we have from the other end is that Mark Gurman at Bloomberg has been reporting that Apple is working on what he called a tabletop robot. And you're like, what would that even be?
Hello.
A table. It's like, so it's not, it's on a tabletop. So it's not going to be driving around my house following me. But if it's on, what would it, if it's just sitting on a table, to make it a robot, it sort of implies that things move around. And so the idea that people have been suspecting is maybe these are all the same product. And the idea is that maybe the screen would connect to the HomePod base using some sort of an arm, and maybe the screen could follow you. Apple has that technology in iPads that if you're on a FaceTime video call, just using a wide camera angle, if you move one way or if you move the other way, it will keep you in the frame. What if the actual screen of this thing had some sort of an arm that could follow you, and so it could turn left as you go to one part of your kitchen, turn right, and sort of follow you around. And maybe there's a lot of technology that would go into that, and you wonder how expensive it would be. And the thing that it reminds me of is the old iMac G4 that had that screen that was exactly like that. It was
on the arm.
So this is 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there was this. It was an
Wow.
iMac that I never owned, and I always wanted one because it looked so cool.
Me
Because
neither.
you had
Right.
your base
Right.
right there on your desk, and then the screen, it wouldn't move automatically. You'd have to use your hands to move it around, but you could make it face whatever direction that you wanted. In fact, that video that you're
It
showing
did
right
move
now,
automatically in this TV commercial, though, Jeff. I
there was
remember
this
this commercial.
hilarious TV commercial, which was almost like violating truth in advertising, where this guy is walking by an Apple store or a technology store that didn't have Apple stores back in 2002.
Right.
And as he's walking back and forth, looking through the store window, the screen on the iMac G4 would move back and forth, and he would go up, and it would go up, and he would go down. And it just sort of pointed out how useful the screen was to be in an arm moving around. But so this idea that was actually in an Apple commercial, 2 decades ago. Maybe this is what this device will be. But then if that's what it's going to do, Brett, you have to wonder, how expensive will this thing be? Because, if the bottom is a HomePod, a HomePod Mini only costs $100, right? And I love they cost $100. Sometimes you can even get them on sale for like $85 because you can just easily. It's not that expensive to like get an additional. I bought up a second. I bought up when they were on sale. I bought an extra one and put it like in a different part of my downstairs. And it's nice because now as you walk between my living room and the room that my piano's in, the music is just in all the different downstairs rooms.
Right.
It's really, really cool.
I like that.
But that's only $100 for a Mini. But if it's going to be a bigger speaker, like a true HomePod, I think those go for like $300. I'm pretty sure. And then the screen itself is going to have to be, I guess, a couple $100, right? So, I mean, are we talking about a device that's going to be $150, or are we talking about a device with a robot arm and a nice screen that's going to be like $600 or $700? Because, one of those price points, maybe I could think about finding a place for it in my life, but the other price point, I don't know. What do you think, Brett? I mean, what do you think about a device like this?
It'd have to be really compelling. And just real quick, I like going back to this iMac idea because I will tell you, on my desk setup, and I've seen this in many other places, we have monitor arms. And I know it's a simple thing, and some people may or may not have them or so, but I love my monitors being on my arm. Like sometimes I'm twisting it from landscape to portrait mode. Other times I'm moving it back and forth. I guess a lot of people don't think about it because most of the time you sit down at a desk and you've got everything set up the way that you like to set up. But I love having the monitor arms and being able to move that around. I would welcome something like that. I mean, there are people that already do this, like in the kitchen. I think we've even talked about some arms you can, connect onto your cabinet or on the, the underneath the cabinet, and then your iPad floats around. Because my wife uses the iPad all the time for recipes, for example. But it'd be nice if it could do something else, along the lines of playing some music or maybe being some kind of a photo frame or something like that. Another article you link to here from Dan Moren over at Six Colors, writing for Macworld. I kind of like this idea. Like, to me, I feel like I already have some of that. When I was first reading some of these stories, that my thought was, wait, don't we already have an iPad? Like, I just need to put an iPad on a monitor arm and I'd be okay. But I like the way that Dan's coming out this, because he's talking about it could change the way we think about she who shall not be named in Siri. In other words, if it's a speaker that could respond to me. Again, this is nothing new. Amazon's had this and Google's had it and that kind of a thing. But if it could be a little bit more accessible than maybe HomePods. I know you've got into the HomePod world. I never did. I still don't have a HomePod. But maybe something like this could really like push me over the edge. Like I've never felt truly compelled on the HomePod side. And I think if they could somehow, mesh this together with the Siri, the tvOS, the capabilities of some on the iPad, it's got to be a really nice screen, to your point, and maybe some kind of a robotic aspect, implementing something of Apple Intelligence / Siri. I think that could be pretty compelling.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. In fact, you said a nice screen. And for my mind, if it's going to be just something in your living room or in your kitchen that you're going to be looking at from away, it doesn't even have to be the nicest screen. So, I mean, Apple could save on the screen times. But, as I'm talking to here, how many times on these podcasts have I been talking over the past, 9 months about how much I love the way that my iPhone can just sit on a little stand here, and using the standby mode, I can just see the time or the calendar. And that's on a small little screen that's the size of the iPad. The iPhone, excuse me. If it was a little bit bigger, so that it could have like the time, but maybe also the weather and the date, and like you say, maybe some pictures, just an interactive photo frame and stuff like that. Gosh, I could sort of see something to this. It's a really interesting idea because it takes a lot of things that Apple is already doing, like you said, an iPad or a speaker, and it
Right.
sort of puts them together. So it's not really something new, and yet sometimes when you put together things, the sum is greater than its parts. So getting it at the right price point, how complicated do you want it to be? Is it going to have robot arms that move around by themselves, or will you just move it with your hand so that it's
Right.
cheaper? Maybe there's two
Right.
versions of it. I don't know. It's it has the potential to be a dud, but it also has the potential to be something interesting. And I'm now that I'm thinking that maybe Apple really is looking at this, it's sort of exciting to think that we could have a new Apple product come out maybe as soon as this calendar year. So
I do really think part of the play here has to be Apple Intelligence. I mean, if they can somehow pull that in, and then I think better compete at that level with like an Alexa or a Google product at that point, from utilizing intelligence, and even if we have those three tiers, right? Like if we have something on product, the private cloud, and then on the open AI aspect, I don't know. I feel like if something along those lines could I think really create something that would be a little bit more interesting than just a HomePod with the screen on something like that. So, but thanks for reporting on that. It's just interesting to see. Like you said, to me, the most exciting thing is the fact that something's already being baked into the the beta here, the
code,
developer beta, and so it's like, okay, that makes it even a little more interesting. Well, even right now, before we get maybe whatever this new Apple TV / HomePod device might be, let's talk a little bit more about Apple TV Plus. One of the things that I know you are very excited about coming out in this Apple tvOS 18 or the iOS 18 is a little thing called, I think they call it Insight. Is that what they're still calling it? Yeah, it looks like it. So this is the idea that we've talked about this, and I'm actually, you got me very excited about it too. Watching a show, watching a movie, and you want to see who are those actors? What else were they in? And many times, what I'm really even more excited about is I want to know what song that is playing right there. Like, I love that song. It's got a great beat. It fits perfectly with the scene. What is that song? I might want to go and download that later. And that, theoretically, is going to be available with the Apple TV Plus Insight mode.
Yeah, so instead of having to jump over to like another app or IMDb or something like that, you could just, I guess you would just pause. And as soon as you pause, right there on your screen, you will see the information and it'll automatically be based upon who's on the screen. And this is the first picture that I've seen of the interface. And of course, this is a beta, so it could change in the future. But what I like about it is it makes perfect sense to me because currently, if you have an Apple TV, and you are looking at like a movie or a TV show or something like that, if you scroll down the screen to where it shows you the cast, it uses the same format. We've seen this before. It's a nice picture of the face in a circle, like a nice high quality picture. It's got the person's name. I think it currently has the real name. I think it currently actually it's maybe only the real name, or maybe it also shows the cast member that they play. Whatever the name of the character is. And then you can tap on a name, and you can get like a little bio for them, stuff like that. But it's that same interface that they're showing here. So this makes perfect sense to me. And then, of course, they're showing a little song. It's almost like a little widget that would jump over in Apple Music, I presume, if you click onto it. So this makes perfect sense to me. But this would be everything that I would want just like right there in front of me that I could get to just from pausing it. And again, I know this is not revolutionary because Amazon offers the same thing on their service. But the Amazon feature is a really useful feature.
X-ray. I think they call it X-ray, something
I like
that,
the Amazon feature. I do like it.
Yeah,
and why shouldn't Apple have something too? They've got all the pieces to put it together. And so I'm excited that this is coming in the tvOS 18 that we're going to have hopefully in September or October. This is the first time I've seen a picture of it. It looks clean. It looks easy to use. This is one of these things that like I will use this probably on day one once this comes to my Apple TV.
Yeah. No question. And I do like the X-ray thing for the same reasons. Now, if I'm not mistaken, obviously this is probably only going to be for content inside Apple TV Plus, right? Because the Amazon X-ray is only available for Amazon Prime shows. Even though Apple TV, does the Apple TV OS does allow you to interact with other services, but I'm guessing it's only for Apple TV Plus content here.
Yeah, and in fact, you're right. This is a TV Plus feature, so that means not only would it work on my Apple TV, but if I was watching a TV Plus show on my iPhone or my iPad or my Apple Vision Pro or any other device, I presume this will be built in there too. But but certainly it will certainly work on the Apple TV device when you're watching Apple TV Plus content.
Here's the other thing about this. I could see where something like the device we were just talking about, or even using my iPhone, I guess, like I don't really sometimes want to pause the show that I'm watching and like pull up something that, you know, takes up half the screen or whatever. I mean, I know it's not that big of a deal, but I would love to be watching and then have either my iPhone or maybe this new, HomePod Plaster board thing kind of be watching and be able to show that information as it goes. If that makes sense? Like, I don't want to pause it. I mean, want to have it going on at the same time, you know, coincidentally at the same time here.
And now that you say that, I actually think that was announced as it would also be on the iPhone in the remote app, so that you could do just that. So yeah,
well, yeah, this story
that's what
it does
showing.
have a
so that must be what they're showing in this
feature
here.
On tvOS and iOS 18 Beta 3 is neat. I especially love the Apple Music shortcut that instantly adds tracks to one's library. Yes, so that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Here.
And he's showing an iPhone screen here, apparently. At least I think that's what it looks like. Or maybe that's the remote app. I'm not really sure. And the other one there. Anyway, that's fantastic. Like, I love the fact that there could be some kind of synchronicity there, because I just love the fact, like, I usually have my phone with me by the side when I'm watching something anyway.
Me too.
I would love to just be able to bring it up and say, what is that song? But I don't want to pause what's on the television screen, but I can say, oh, that's the song, and pop. In fact, I remember this. It wasn't a show on Apple TV Plus. It was Bosch. I think it was Amazon was where that was. I love the opening credits song for that. And every time it came on, my wife and I were watching it, and I would be like, man, I've got to find that song. Like, what is that song? And I couldn't usually find, then I start getting into the show, right? And I forget about it. But the other day, I remember I was listening to, I think it was Spotify that I was on, and I'm like, wow, that song sounds familiar. Where is that? Oh, that's the song. Like, it took me a while to get there, but, just to give an example of something that I'm excited about.
It's funny, Brett, because you and I grew up in the age of listening to radio, so we would often discover new songs from over the air radio. Nowadays, I never listen to radio anymore, and I guess some people do, but that's fine. Right. But for me, I'm always listening to Apple to stuff that I have on my iPhone and everything else.
Right.
I would probably say that the number one way I discover new music is probably hearing a cool song in a TV show or a movie or something like that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, obviously, sometimes you see it in the media, and or my kids are listening to it. I discover it that way too. But it is definitely a top way that I find new artists, or maybe an old artist that I've never heard of. And the next thing you know, you add it to your catalog and you start looking at their other songs and you find even more stuff. So yeah, this is a big deal.
I feel like it's an exercise in futility for me to get my kids to understand the power of Shazam. Because we're in a store or something like that, or a movie, and I'm like, oh, that's a great song. I want to look that up. And they look at me like, Dad, just put Shazam. And I'm like, oh yeah, you don't understand. You kids just don't get it these days. Like, this was just unheard of that we could do something along those lines. Anyway, pretty excited about that. Something I know that you're excited about, because you linked to a couple of other things that are coming out on Apple TV Plus. One of them is apparently season 2 of Severance, coming out soon.
Now, remind me, you did or did not watch season 1? Brett?
I have not, and I got to tell you,
well,
I have heard from like 3 or 4 different people the last week, like, telling me, "Are you serious? You've not seen it?"
Well, now,
which tells me I might have to go back and try it now.
Yeah, it's all good, Brett, because now you know what your deadline is, because the new season comes out January. Is it 24th? January 17th. So January 17th is the new season. So you've got yourself about, what is that, like 5 months now? You can calendar it, decide if you can binge it all at once or do a slow binge over time. But your homework is between now and January, because it's such a great show. I mean, it really is. There are the shows on Apple TV Plus that, as I said, rise to the top. Ted Lasso, a couple of them are just the best of the best of the best. Severance was so good. In fact, it's so good that sometimes shows are amazing in their first season, and then they're never quite as good after that. But then again, sometimes shows will surprise you that they'll start off great and somehow find a way to be even better in the second season. And I'm sure that Apple put the money towards whatever was necessary to make this an even better second season. So anyway, that's all. I don't want to think of people like you that haven't seen it.
Good, and I appreciate that.
So good, and I love that we have a release date. So
I feel like Apple's got a pretty good track record here. I'm thinking immediately of Ted Lasso. I'm not saying that the second season was better than the first, because, the first just is such a tidal wave. Like, everybody just jumps on the bandwagon. Slow Horses was another one. I can tell, because it's not that I enjoy maybe the second season more than the first season, but I feel like I'm just as engrossed in the story and everything in the second season. And to me, that's a win for a lot of shows out there. Another thing you linked to, because we're talking about shows there, but what about some blockbuster movies that are coming out, like summer blockbusters. I mean, we've had some pretty good movies come out from Apple, but this is another one it sounds like you're pretty excited about, starring none other, of course, than Brad Pitt. F1, which I'm assuming refers to the F1 racing car.
Exactly.
Looks like it's going to be coming out pretty soon, or maybe not really soon, but maybe a summer blockbuster on the horizon here.
Right. So what's interesting here is I'm fascinated by this in the context of Apple TV Plus sort of expanding what it is. Apple TV Plus starts out very, very few shows. It's just a couple of shows. When I say shows, I mean like episodic shows with different episodes. And then over time, they started to branch out into a couple of movies, not many, but a couple of them. And then for some of those movies, they actually went out and paid big bucks to get like high name directors, or looked for stuff at Sundance or these film festivals that were going to be really good, like Coda, for example. And then they sort of embraced it, and they would come out to the theater. And so they were going after like the Oscars and stuff like that. And in fact, you almost got the sense that when Apple was buying the content, part of the reason that they were even releasing it in a theater as opposed to going straight to Apple TV Plus is that they wanted it to be eligible for Oscar content. And that was great. It resulted in some movies that were really, really good. Example, Coda is a perfect example of one of the best ones. But now this is something different. Another type of movie is the summer blockbuster. It's going to be an action adventure. It's going to come out in July. It's the thing that you're going to want to see on the biggest screen possible. And this is what Apple appears to be doing with this movie. They're filming it in IMAX. Like 100 minutes of the movie is going to be in an IMAX format. So if you can find a big IMAX theater to go see it, and it's going to be, I mean, it's done by some of the people that were responsible for things like the what's the new the Top Gun Maverick, and of course Jerry Bruckheimer, who's been involved for so many of these big budget action. But, so they're paying money to the people that have made summer blockbusters. They've got Brad Pitt, who's a huge star. What are you going to do that's as exciting as military planes, going through the air, a million miles per hour? How about cars racing as fast as possible? And they're filming this thing at the actual F1 races. And so, during breaks in the action in the real races, they have their actors quickly go on there and film scenes with the real stadiums behind them, everything else. So, they are doing everything that they can. Brad Pitt's really driving cars. I think that the rumor is it's this article that you're showing from Deadline says maybe it wasn't an F1 car, it was an F2 car, which is not quite as fast, although still really fast, but modified to make it look like an F1 car. Certainly way beyond anything that I'm going to be able to drive for sure. And they've actually got Brad Pitt and these other people doing it. Some of the real F1 racers are actually in the movie.
Lewis Hamilton, for crying out loud.
All of the elements of a, I mean, can you imagine the adrenaline rush? If it's a good plot, I mean, who knows? It could be a dud. But if it's a good plot and it's interesting and it's filmed with these incredible cameras and it's got great actors in it and it's got great stars and it moves fast and it's engaging, that is the recipe for a summer blockbuster. And Apple has never done one of these before. So, just because you put all the pieces together doesn't mean it's going to be great. But maybe it will be. And wouldn't it be fun if Apple got into this? And so then wouldn't it be fun if like every year we would have the next Apple TV Plus summer blockbuster movie that you're going to want to go see on the big IMAX screen. And then a couple months later, you'll watch it again in your at your home. And so I'm excited about it because I'm excited about the particular movie, even though I'm not a big racing fan, but just everything about this looks like it's going to be a huge adrenaline rush. And I love the idea of Apple getting into this genre.
Now, just real quick, because you mentioned this and I see the question right here. So it's not going to be released to Apple TV Plus directly?
Not at first.
Or first.
No, I mean, that's the thing.
Going to the theater and IMAX first.
Yeah, so this is my point about talking about the Oscar movies. I got the sense in those other movies that they would just release it for a few weeks to get the awards, but then what they really wanted to do was put on TV. And sometimes they would do it just to satisfy the director or the actors, that they actually get to be in something that you could go to a theater. But I get the sense for this that Apple wants it to be a true theater movie that Apple will make money off of, just like other studios do. But then when it's time to go to, the home video, I mean, it's just going to only be on Apple TV Plus. So if you missed it in the theater, the only place that you'll see it is on the TV Plus service. You won't find it on Netflix. You won't find it on any of the other ones. So it's a new way. And if Apple can make money off of this, and if it makes sense, then that sounds great. Sounds great.
It just makes me think real quick, because here's the flip side of this. I don't know if you follow Casey Neistat on YouTube, but he apparently is good friends with the director of the movie that just came out with Jake Gyllenhaal not too long ago, Roadhouse, if you remember that. if you go watch, Casey did this little vignette of a YouTube video of talking to this director who was fit to be tied because this came out through Amazon in a similar way. But Amazon forced him to go directly to the Amazon platform and not go to the theater first. And I remember that in this video, it's been a while since I've seen it, but the director was upset and didn't, like, he was fighting with Amazon, but he eventually went to like the screening with the actors, you know, the first screening that came out, because it was the only time that it was actually going to be shown in a theater. And I just listening to him, you know, talk through that experience and just seeing kind of an opposite effect here. Like, he wanted it to be shown in the theater. And I distinctly remember him saying, like, this was shot with the idea, like, you know, it's a beat 'em up movie, right? Roadhouse. It's actually a pretty fun movie, but he's like, it's designed to be experienced with a bunch of people. Like, you know, you're cheering for the good guy, you know, and that kind of a thing. And anyway, just it made me think about that when you're talking about Apple is going to go to theater first. No, like, that's their strategy. But others, maybe like Amazon Prime and those, I don't know, maybe they're thinking about it differently. You know, maybe there's all kinds of marketing approaches here, and I think financial interest and stuff. But anyway, just kind of an interesting, I guess, a different approach to that. But, you know, it's just, to me, it's just seeing how a lot of this streaming versus theater entertainment approaches are coming in these days.
Yep.
We've talked about tvOS 18, iOS 18. Let's talk about iPhotos, or sorry, I still call it iPhotos. The Photos app in iOS 18. You had a really quick little story here from Federico over at Mac Stories that he initially wasn't happy with the Photos app, the way the changes that Apple was going to be making, but it sounds like he's coming around a little bit to this, Jeff.
Yeah, and I was happy to see this when we first saw the debut, you know, just a month or so ago, of what Photos was going to look like in iOS 18. You know, the first thing that we all thought of is, wow, this is a different interface. Is that bad? Because, you know, we all like what's familiar, especially for something like Photos, which is used by so many people, including people that would never think about listening to a technology podcast or a technology website.
My mom.
Are they going to see something that makes them upset because it's different? And I was glad to see, you know, admittedly, Federico is on the real geeky side of things, but I was glad to see him say that after using it just for a couple of weeks, that the changes, you know, did not seem so disruptive. And yet the way that it exposed himself to all of the photos that were deep in his library that he may have forgotten about were really pleasant. So it makes me, you know, what he wrote here was really short, I think, because Federico is, you know, every year he does his big iOS review that comes out in September. So I'm sure he's saving most of his thoughts for his huge review, which is coming later this year. But for now, I thought it was interesting for him to say, you know what? It's okay. Like, once you get used to it, this is actually going to be a good change. And that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that not only is it going to have all the powerful new features, but it's not going to be so disruptive that you're going to say, like, why did they have to change this? So so that's what made me interested to see that article.
My hope is that it is just simply going to be a little bit more intuitive. You're right. A lot of people get into Photos. I got to be honest with you. Sometimes I get into Photos and I'm like, I know I'm looking for a specific album, or I want a shared album, not just my own album that somebody shared with me. And I feel like it takes me 2 or 3 more taps than it should, I guess. Or I'm like, I have to sit there and wait. Like, hey, is that in albums, or is it what tab is it in? I'm really kind of liking some of these mock-ups here, and actually some of the beta looking, because, like you said, still in developer betas right now before it even gets to the public betas. So hopefully Apple is continuing to tweak it and make it look a little bit better. But you're right, this is very encouraging that Federico is recognizing it here as well.
Indeed.
Where are you at? Boy, not just 1, not 2, but 3 where you at stories quickly here, Jeff. And these are some good ones. I like this. Hey, we talk about AirTags a whole lot. They can work for just about anything that you might lose or get stolen, including a campaign sign. I like this from the Wall Street Journal, but man, 'tis the season, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I saw this article, it never even occurred to me that use an AirTag this way. You know, we've all seen campaign sites that, you know, people put all over town and in lawns or, you know, busy intersections and stuff like that. And, you know, apparently this one candidate in Florida was upset that he kept putting out signs, which apparently are not cheap. I think he was paying, I don't know, big. I had no idea how expensive those signs are, but apparently they're more expensive than I realized. And he said that he kept having to replace them because they would go missing. And he's like, who who's taking my signs? And so he just thought about
right.
sticking an air. Now, how exactly you stick an AirTag on a sign, I'm not exactly sure. What he should do is get like one of those thin like Eufy cards that are made to go in your wallet, because you could maybe stick it in there, but stick it in the foam. But he somehow managed to stick an AirTag into the sign. Sure enough, the sign is stolen, and he was able to track it and find out with the aid of the police that apparently it was a bunch of teenagers that thought that it would be, you know, I guess that, I mean, it never explored if it was the opponent that was paying the opponent,
exactly.
This,
that's what I was thinking, right?
Or if it was just the teenagers thinking that they were being cute because they were taking the signs and putting them in their truck. But one way or the other, he got the, you know, it cost him $25 to get an AirTag, but he got his solution. So that's an interesting use of Find
totally
Mine.
Worth it. But you know, I would feel like if you call the police and say, listen, my campaign signs keep getting stolen, I don't know that would be at the top of the list of things that the officers would consider as something important. But if at least maybe you have an extra data point that you could provide them with, like, hey, here's the location of these of these stolen goods, they might be able to check it out. Same thing happened. Where was this? In Malaysia, apparently. Somebody had their car valet parked, but then it was gone. Fortunately, they had an AirTag in the car and they could track it down, and the law enforcement there were able to recover that one for them.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, it was in a shopping mall with valet parking, and he goes to mall security, and like they have no idea. They're totally unhelpful, he said. But then because of the AirTag that was in his car, he was able to figure out where it was, get the police involved, and they were able to find it. So just another one of these examples, and something that I think about, you know, whenever you turn over a car to a valet, you know, you're giving them your keys, you're giving them your car.
Yes, you are.
I personally feel a lot better about it. The few times that I've used a valet since I put an AirTag in my car, I feel like, you know, now at least I know where it is.
Yeah, good stuff there. Last story on this, a little bit of a twist on this one, not involving an AirTag, but actually a HomePod that saved a family from a house fire that apparently was accidentally set by the family dog. Boy, that's a no, Fido. That's not good.
Let's start by address, how does the dog cause the fire? But apparently,
I know, like
that was my first question. But apparently, the people had like some sort of a cardboard box that somebody had just set on top of a stove. Don't do that, I guess. Don't do that, because apparently the dog must have used his paw to start the flame, and then because there was a box on top of the stove, it catches fire.
Ouch.
And so, of course, that caused the fire. You know, they have like a little fire alarm in their device to go off.
Smoke alarm.
But this is the interesting thing. So the HomePod has had a feature for a while now that if it detects a sound, it can give you a warning, and it can detect things like a fire alarm sound, a baby crying. And these are all features that I think were originally designed as accessibility features for people that were hard of hearing. So you can't hear the alarm.
I remember that.
But if the fire alarm goes off and you have an alert on your phone saying, hey, there's a fire alarm in your kitchen, then you would be detected even if you couldn't hear it. Now, I don't know that there was an accessibility issue here. I think the family was just upstairs in their bedroom and the door was closed. And I guess they just couldn't hear it. You know, and my house, I have these things called the Nest smoke detectors, that one of the things that I like about them, and this is a Google product now, that they're all connected to each other. So like if one part of the house detects a fire, the smoke alarm and like every smoke alarm goes off. So even upstairs in our bedroom, we would still hear it. But I guess this family just had like traditional smoke alarms. And so the HomePod hears the smoke alarm, sends the alert to them, which then wakes them up, and they were able to get down there and put the fire out. So it's I would not have predicted this fact pattern. It almost sounds like something on a law school exam, as they say, something that's just so fanciful that, you know, this would never happen in real life.
Never happen in real life.
Here we go. It actually happened in real life. So from the dog to the HomePod to the fire detector to the bedroom to the iPhone to, you know, saving the house.
Maybe the dog had an AirTag on it as well.
Oh, that would have been another twist. I like that.
I do remember quickly that I think this is baked into even the iPhone. And somewhere I seem to remember there was a commercial from Apple where there was a mother that was either deaf or hard of hearing, but you know, she was, when the baby was crying, right? Do you remember this, Jeff, or something like that? That the phone or maybe the Apple Watch could even notify her that the baby was crying. So when you said that, that's kind of the thing I was thinking. And I'm glad that it's not just limited to babies crying. It's also going to be alert to smoke alarms going off on there. Let's talk about the Vision Pro just real quick in a very short aspect, because this was, I thought, a little bit of an interesting clip that you sent here from a YouTube video from EFTM. Apparently it's an Australian magazine, but they interviewed Tim Cook, and they were asking Tim Cook a little bit about the Vision Pro and sort of, the idea of what it is. I thought there were some really cool components in this, Tim addressing like one of his favorites, like how he uses actually uses the Vision Pro himself. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's what I enjoyed about it. I mean, if you're interested in hearing, at least from Apple's perspective, from the very top of Apple, Tim Cook himself, what you might use the Vision Pro for, this is a full, almost 10-minute interview that's all about the Vision Pro, because the Vision Pro is now coming to Australia. So that's all that they talk about. And, he asks Tim all sorts of questions about how Tim Cook uses his own Vision Pro. And, a lot of the answers that Tim gives are sort of the marketing speak answers of, can you pick what's the best? And he's like, oh, well, of course it's good for, he won't answer one thing. It's good for this and for this and for this. And yet along the way, it's a long enough interview that he actually does reveal some of the different things that he uses it for, from entertainment purposes to getting work done to, having different screens in different places. And so I just enjoyed hearing him talk about all the different things that you could do with the Vision Pro, and including some of the stuff that has been announced already and that's coming soon to the Vision Pro update. So if it was a nice sort of deep dive into the Vision Pro. I enjoyed it.
Well, that's one Apple executive. We have two Apple executives interviews to share today. I really enjoyed this one. It's from a channel that I wasn't too familiar with, Super Staff, but apparently lots of other people are very familiar with it. And he sat down with Eddy Q. I really enjoyed this video, Jeff, just talking about not just hearing Tim Cook and how he uses the actual devices every day. Eddy Q went even deeper into some of that, not just about the devices he used. In fact, I love the fact that Super Staff here was asking Eddy, what is your daily driver? Which, we know that term sort of in the tech circles is like, what are the tools that you are using every day, software-wise, hardware-wise? And Eddy was able to answer exactly like what he does for each device. And I just really thought there was lots of really good nuggets in this little video. It's only about 30 minutes, but I thought the interview was really excellent.
Yeah, it's worth watching for so many reasons. Eddy Q does not do a lot of videos. I don't know if it's by design or just by the nature. He is a very important executive at Apple, but he is sort of the deal maker. He's the one, he's in charge of all the services. So it's everything from Apple Music to Apple TV to you name it. And so when it's time to negotiate with a studio or with the director, I mean, obviously he doesn't do it all himself. Involved. He's got some smart people that work with him, but he's at the top, right? And so he's involved in all of this stuff. And it's a really interesting side of Apple. So he's not making the next, although I'm sure he's involved to a certain degree because he points out that they have meetings all the time, but he's not coming up with the next design for the iPad. I'm sure he's not designing that the thing that's going to sit on you in your kitchen and have something that moves around and the tabletop robot. Exactly. But if it's in the works, he knows about it for sure. And he's probably negotiating some rights to put sports programs on it or something like that. And so it was interesting to hear from someone like this, that's coming from a different side of the company. And it, like you say, it's a long running interview. There were so many different parts of it. The story that I mentioned in the news this week was the story that Find My, which is something we just did a whole segment talking about different ways of Find My being used, that this all came from someone who was a summer intern at Apple and had an idea of, wouldn't it be a great if you could find a lost iPhone? And I have to admit, I've heard a lot of these types of stories. I actually don't think I'd heard this one before. And I did a quick jump on the internet last night, Brett, just to see if someone else was like, if that's a story that's been out in the news for a long time. And I couldn't find it. So maybe not. Maybe there's, so I don't know who this person is, but I mean, hey, if you're the summer intern that came up with the idea of Find My, which is now got major technology, AirTags and everything else based on it, wow, good job, summer intern.
No kidding.
That is awesome. Good for you. And so somebody out there has a story. So that was just one time. And that was just a throw aside story. There was, I know that you listened to it too. So I'd be curious to see, what were some of the stories that jumped out at you that were interesting that he mentioned?
I just, anytime, I guess because you and I are a little bit nerdy on this, like I just love to hear those back end stories. Exactly what you just said, Jeff. I picked up on that immediately because first of all, an intern, really? Like that's where the idea came from? And then immediately, second of all, I'm like, thank you, Eddy, as the leader, as an executive, for like listening to people like that, right? In other words, he gave credit where credit was due, and I just thought that was good. The other thing quickly that I thought was interesting is Supersap asked about just like music. And I think the question, if he wasn't trying to be so nice, the question would have been like, why is Apple Music better than Spotify or something along those lines? He was asking about it.
Right.
But Eddy was really understanding about it because, again, I think we've, underscoring a lot of this is Eddy and Tim and all the other executives use, the products that they create. But he said, listen, Eddy said, people are going to go, where they want to listen to the music. And he even said all these services pretty much have the same songs, right? Everybody pretty much has the same songs. But the thing that he listed, two that caught my eye or caught my ear is, number one, they understood that there needs to still be a human element to it. I think that's the way he described it, or a human component to it, which is why that they still have radio shows. He calls them radio shows, on iTunes or on Apple Music that you can go in and listen. Like, these are human curated shows that basically, that are famous DJs that can go in and play. And sometimes I'll listen to it. It's a good way, as you said earlier, to, find new music. The second thing that I really enjoy hearing him talk about is we wanted to bring that same kind of an intuitive experience to classical music as opposed to just general music, I guess, because we reported on this, a year ago or so, Jeff, when they created the Apple Classical Music app, which I admittedly don't go into a whole lot, but every once in a while I'll jump into it. And it really is just a joy. I don't have a ton of knowledge about classical music, but just the way that they created the interface and allow, things to bubble up and genre, different types of classical music. They really do a good job. And again, you and I have said this many, many times, and Eddy said this as well, that music is sort of baked into the entire culture. It's something that they're very passionate about there at the company. He even harkened back to Steve Jobs, coming back and the original work on iTunes, because Eddy's been there for 36 years. He was talking about, it was just so great to be able to hear about some of the memories and some of the things. It was like, like his favorite products, that kind of a thing. So anyway, you can tell I get pretty excited about this interview. It's always fun for me to see when people are excited to talk about sort of the back, from folks that don't do a lot of these type of interviews.
Yeah, he was asked how, something about his typical workday, and one of the things that Eddy joked about was that I think he said, like, hey, I only work 30 days a year, and his joke was that there's 30 days every year that he actually does that's something that's sort of arduous, and he continues to work, and the rest of it he's just doing things that he really enjoys. And I know that that's sort of an old say, if you love what you and if you love your job, you never work a day in your life. Yeah, exactly. But it's true. He expressed that passion that he, and I know a lot of other people that work for Apple, just truly, as he pointed out, this is one of the rare companies that you use what you do. You create products like the iPhone and the iPad, but you use those products every day. He's involved in creating, Apple Music and Apple TV Plus, but then he enjoys those things. And so, what a great job to be able to make things so that you could then sit down and enjoy your own products, of enjoying your TV shows and your movies and your music and everything else. And I actually thought that was an interesting answer to it.
Speaking of which, he's excited about Severance 2 as well, Jeff. Did you hear?
And what I love,
he's very excited.
He clearly could find out what's going on in season 2.
He could have watched it already.
I did not. Right. He said, I purposefully have avoided paying attention to what the team is doing because I want to wait until the entire season is done, and then I can watch it as it's intended to be. So he's exhibiting perhaps better.
How crazy is that? The one person that could have watched it, whatever he wants to watch it, he's chosen not to because he wants to do it, in the final product. That was crazy. I love that.
Exactly. So anyway, it's a nice interview. If you have an interest in listening to Apple executives talk about things, this one is special. It's a little better than many of the other Apple executive interviews that we've seen over the years.
Agreed.
And I didn't necessarily intend to sit down and listen to it for 30 minutes, but it was one of those, like, once I put it on, I just kept listening. It was just so fun to listen to.
Yeah.
So
very good. In the know. We've talked about AirTags enough that I'm like, okay, I gotta find an AirTag tip, and
this is a good one,
and it did, because I think this has only been out for maybe about 8 months or so. This came out in iOS 17, right? And we probably reported on this, but I got to be honest with you, I hadn't tried it now. AirTags, I love them. I think I've got 8 total now. I just keep buying them whenever they go on the really good price sales because it's so good. Like, I put them in, my wife has one in her purse, my daughter has her purse, I got it in my luggage. Now I'm going to put it on my campaign signs. It's great. They're going to be all over the place. But the fact of the matter that not only can you track it, obviously, we know that we have the Find My app on the phone, and we can track it ourselves. But I really like this now. You can share an AirTag. So I've actually done this with my wife. So I have an AirTag in the primary roller bag that I take with me when I go traveling at places. Now, my wife, of course, can track me through the Find My app as the person, because if you look down to the bottom of the Find My app, you have people, devices, and then items. And the items is under where the AirTags will appear, right? So I've got my roller bag there. And if you tap into the AirTag, once you get it all connected and everything, you can then scroll down and you'll see that there's a section right in the middle of the screen that says share this AirTag. So you tap share this, or add person, I think is what it is. Here, this Macworld article is really good about doing this. You tap it. Now, before you can add somebody, Apple will give you the little warning confirmation box. Others can locate this item if you allow them, if you share it with them. Tracking notifications will be muted. You also have the idea that that if you want to remove them, you can. Anyway, it goes through all of the disclaimers there, just making sure that you fully understand what you're doing there. But it was really easy. I say add person, I say okay, and then I just go and I found my wife, and I basically sent her an invitation. So before, you don't just share and it's done. You send them an invitation. I think they get an email, but it may have been sent via message. I don't really know, to be honest with you, on that, because I haven't asked her how she got it yet. But then they accept it, because right now it says it's pending. So my wife's invitation that I sent to her is pending right now. And if I tap on pending, it'll let me view friend, or I can withdraw the invitation. I don't want to do that yet because I want her to go and accept it. So then not only can she track me as a person, well, actually my iPhone, right, in the Find My app, because I share my location with her, but she can now also track my rollerboard, my bag. Now, not that she's going to really be tracking my bag, but the reason that I wanted to go ahead and do that is, number one, I could certainly see a time maybe when I would lose my iPhone and I still want her to, be able to track, or if my iPhone battery dies and I have a situation where I'm trying to track my AirTag, I might be able to get in touch with her, or if she's with me, I can use her Find My app. I feel like it's good. If you go on vacation with a family, you can share the AirTags you're using in your luggage with all your members, right? So that everybody can see and track that, because sometimes I do find that the AirTag doesn't update quite as quickly as I would like it to be, but quick enough. You sometimes have to be a little bit patient. Or frankly, sometimes I'll even share an AirTag. It might be my daughter's AirTag in her car, for example. She's tracking it, but I might also want her to share that with me so that I can track the car too, or just have that capability. So really neat aspect there. Maybe it was an idea of a summer intern at Apple. I don't know, but I just like the idea that I'd forgotten about this, that they added this on iOS 17. But not only can you use AirTags now, but you have the option to share an AirTag with, it doesn't have to be a family member. It can be anybody, really, anybody in your contacts. They have to be in your contacts first in order to select them. But obviously, most of the time, I'm going to see that you could share it with your family. So try that out if you haven't already.
Yeah, and one thing that you didn't mention, Brad, is let's say, for example, you're in some difficult travel situation, your luggage gets separated from you, and so while you're dealing with one thing, maybe your wife could be tracking down your luggage and helping somebody track it down. So or vice versa, or something like that. So yeah, that's a great tip. Right. I was really happy, or sharing luggage. I mean, my wife and I have sometimes I typically use my own suitcase, but sometimes I may use the one that she primarily uses, and vice versa. And so by just sharing this, you can do it. So when I saw that you did this tip today, my tip of the day is to sort of step back from this general idea of sharing to get into the concept of recovery contacts and recovery keys. And the reason I wanted to talk about this issue is, so once something is lost, you've lost an item, you've lost a phone, you've lost whatever, you're going to want to track it down. And of course, hopefully you have your iPhone, because if you do, that's can usually lead you to what you need to know. But what if your iPhone is the thing that was lost, or it's one of many things that's lost? You can use somebody else's device to help define your own stuff, which is similar to what you were just sort of talking about. Now, when you're using the Find My app, there's a distinction between things that Find My calls devices. Those are computer things, a laptop, an iPad, an iPhone, something like that. Those are devices, an Apple Watch. Those are all devices. And by default, if you have a family set up in your iCloud, I mean, I have it, my wife and I and our two kids are
Sure.
all part of the same iCloud family. By default, without doing anything, I can track my wife's laptop, my son's Apple Watch, all that sort of stuff, because those are devices. Now, AirTags, on the other hand, are called items. AirTags and similar AirTag-like devices that you get from third parties, like that Eufy card I referred to earlier, are called items. And the items are the things that by default, you only see your own items, i.e. your own AirTags. I don't see my wife's AirTags. I don't see my kids' AirTags. And then if you just described, of course, a way that you can get around that by doing that. If you get into a situation where you need to track down your stuff and you don't have one of your own devices to do it with, say you're traveling and you've lost your iPhone and you don't have any of your devices with you, then you get into a situation where you want to use somebody else's computer, device, whatever, to find your own stuff. And you can do this. It just gets a little complicated. Now, in the old days, what you used to do is you used to just go to a single website. And I don't say the old days, this is still current now. You can go to iCloud.com/find, which you're showing on the screen right now, and you could sign in. Now, of course, you're going to have to know your password and your user ID and your password. And if your password is something complicated, maybe you only have that on your iPhone, so maybe you don't have that with you. So think about, is that something that you shared with your wife or somebody else that you can get to it? But even if you get through this screen, if you've got some of the more advanced security turned on your iPhone, and I'm not going to go through it all today, but we've talked about this in the past, advanced data protection, stuff like that, even this website won't necessarily get you where you need to go. Apple has two technologies. They want to make it that they don't want to make it easy for a bad guy to steal your stuff and then take over your device. We've talked about this in the past, that if a bad guy gets access to your Apple ID, they could then delete all your photos and do everything else. You got to protect all that stuff. But at the same time, you don't want to have a situation where you have amnesia or you lose your password manager and you can't even get to your own things. And so Apple has two things set up to allow you to get into stuff if you've lost your initial mode of access. And one of them is called recovery contacts, and one's called recovery keys, and you can use either one of them or both, up to you. So recovery contacts, real quick. Recovery contact is you designate somebody that you trust to say, this is somebody that if I lose access to my account, this is somebody who can help me. And I think of you might want to do this for your spouse, or maybe one of your kids. They might want to designate you. If you've got a parent, especially, that maybe doesn't understand technology as much, you might want to help them to designate you as the recovery contact for your parent, so that if they just forget or can't get into their account or whatever, you'll have the ability to help them to unlock their account, because maybe they've lost their password or something like that. Doesn't matter if they lost their password. Even if you don't have a copy of the password, you can still authenticate through your devices. Yes, allow my parent to get into their device. And there's a long process that you go through, and it's spelled out on this page, but it's one thing that you can do. A second thing that you can do is called the recovery key process. And this is where you print out this thing or store it somewhere, your password manager, that's like a super, super, super long combination of keys and letters, but it's like it's your Uber password. So that even if you forget your regular password, if you have this one recovery key that maybe you keep in like a bank security box or something like that, it can be, it can be another way to get in. I can prove to Apple that I'm really me. Now, if you don't have this, if you forget your own password, and if you don't have a recovery contact, and if you don't have your recovery key, then you might be sort of out of luck. So it's nice that Apple gives you these options. And in fact, Apple won't even let you turn on some of their highest levels of security unless you have enabled at least one of these options, either the recovery key or the recovery contact. And if you've got friends and family, maybe recovery contact's a good way to go. If you don't have anybody that you trust enough, then that's fine. Don't trust a person, just trust your recovery key and make sure that it's in a location but these are all these high level security things. And I mention all of this now because it's a little complicated, but these are the sort of things that you want to figure out now while everything is good. Because if you lose your device, things get complicated, and Apple is trying to protect your security. They don't want to just, anybody that calls up and claims that their name is Jeff Richardson suddenly has access to my stuff. They want to make sure that only the right person is getting access. It's a little complicated, but it is logical. It's just, it requires a couple of different steps. It requires a couple levels of authentication, and it's good to get all this stuff set up correctly now, so that if you're in that situation of, oh my goodness, I've lost, thieves have come in, they've taken all my devices, they stole my computer, they stole my iPad, they stole my iPhone. How do I get access to my stuff? These are the sorts of things that you'll be looking towards.
Now, do you suggest doing both of these, Jeff, or do you just do one of them?
It's up to you. I do both of them. I have both the recovery key and I have the recovery contacts. And for me, that the more that you do, the more risk you have, because if I have that recovery key, there's the risk that some bad guy would find that super secret location where I lost it. And again, when you make somebody a recovery contact, what happens if it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you break up, or it's a spouse and you get divorced, or it's, a kid and the kid doesn't think about putting it somewhere safe and leaves it on a subway or a train, so you're going to always be weighing levels of risks, but you just need to decide what's the appropriate level for you. Who do you feel comfortable giving it to? What's an appropriate risk versus the risk of you yourself forgetting or somehow losing your password or something like that.
So my next question, if I have both contact recovery, contact and recovery key turned on,
either one could be used.
Okay, so in other words, if I got them both turned on, I got some balloons happening there. If I have them both turned on, then I can use either one, right? I don't have to use both of them if both of them are turned on.
You don't have to.
Is that right? Okay,
either one. You're giving yourself two options. Exactly.
Because I have recovery contact turned on, and that's my wife. But I do not have recovery key turned on. And I guess I probably got nervous in the same way, in the sense that, well, I don't know where to store this, because typically where I would store it would be in 1Password, where 1Password now actually has their own recovery key as well, right? That you have to print off and, and store it. I mean, I guess you could store it in a safe, but in the situations that you're talking about, I'm not gonna have access to the safe. I'm probably gonna be out of town or something
Brett,
like
there's
that.
No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with you making the decision that recovery key is not for you. I think it's perfectly logical. I have decided that I actually think it's invaluable enough for me that I've done it. But again, whether you use it or not, my point is just think about this. If you feel comfortable using a recovery person, do it. And if you don't feel comfortable, you don't trust anybody enough, don't do it. If you feel but I encourage you to use at least one of them, because something could happen where you need to get, I've lost access through every other way. I either need that trusted person, the recovery contact, or I need that trusted, very secure password, the code, the recovery key. You need to I really encourage you to have at least one of them.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. And by the way, I'll make sure that these links are in the show notes here, but I know it's a complicated thing, but it is easy to get to it. You go to settings, you tap your name, and there's a section called sign in and security. And then there's a section called account recovery. So you can get to that. And that's where I'm looking right now, that I have a recovery contact, recovery key is turned off. But the last thing quickly I'll add to this, Jeff, is that my wife made me a recovery contact for her Apple account. And at the bottom of that screen, it says, I am account recovery for my wife. And so at the bottom of that screen, you can see, not only can you add other people, but then you can see other people have added you. And that's good, because that's how you're going to get that code, that special recovery code for somebody, if they need it, to kind of pull, put a bow on that. Coming full circle around on that thing. I just wanted to mention that. Great tip. And absolutely, I will chime in, second that, third that, fourth that. Absolutely select one of these. I think at the very least, a recovery contact is really, really a good idea. And then if you really just want to make sure that, you want to protect, and put on the extra layer of recovery key. That's the way I kind of looked at it. Recovery contact to me is a no-brainer when they put this in. Good stuff, Jeff. Thank you for adding that. Whew, okay, I think we're done. Boy, that's a lot. Thanks for joining me. And as always, and we'll talk with you next week, Jeff.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.